Good morning. I'm Jan Irwin, Head of Education at the Ulrich Museum, and thanks to everyone for joining us this morning for our ongoing series of 10 paired faculty talks taking place during the 23rd Faculty Biennial. It's all part of the process. On view through May 8th, our galleries are open with safety protocols in place Monday through Saturday, 11 to 5, and as always, free to all. Now in its 46th year, the biennial showcases the breadth of creative work and research being undertaken by the faculty of the School of Art and Design and Creative Industries in art history, art education, ceramics, curatorial practice, drawing, graphic design, painting, photography, printmaking, sculpture, and new media. This series of talks on the biennial's theme, It's All Part of the Process, seeks to prompt reflections and start conversations about each faculty member's personal process, highlighting the diversity of activities that contribute to creative practice, from research to studio time to interactions with colleagues and students. I hope you will join us for the next virtual faculty talks on Thursday, April 1st at 11 a.m. for Staring into Space and Doing Everything with Dr. Brittany Lockhart, Associate Professor of Art History. This morning, we welcome Lori Santos, Associate Professor of Art Education. Unfortunately, Tina Murano will not be able to join us this morning, but we hope to be able to schedule her talk for a later date. Pedagogical practices that apply inclusive and creative approaches to art education inform the work of Lori Santos. She treats students as emerging professionals who actively contribute to the growth of the education field. Through community-based art projects, Lori encourages her students to become agents of change with the skills to seek resources and build partnerships that strengthen their communities. Lori's research and teaching interests include cultural and community curriculum development, cross-cultural and indigenous arts, diversity in pre-service teacher training, and social justice and critical theories in art. She has taught in museums, community centers, cultural sites, homeschool groups, social service centers, public schools, and universities. Lori is active in the art education community, presenting regularly at conferences for organizations such as the Kansas Art Education Association, National Art Education Association, United States Society for Education Through the Arts, and the National Association of Multicultural Education. Her recent scholarship includes a collaborative article in the summer 2019 issue of the journal Visual Arts and Mapping Our Practices, a chapter in the 2018 NAEA publication, Culturally Sensitive Art Education in a Global World, a handbook for teachers. Lori is a past recipient of the UAEA Art Education Higher Educator Award for the state of Utah. Lori's presentation will be followed by a Q&A in which we will give everyone attending permission to turn on your cameras and mics to join the conversation. And please, if you prefer, feel free to add your questions and comments to the chat box throughout the presentation. Welcome, Lori. Hi, Lori. I will turn it over to you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Happy to be here this morning. To get started, first I wanted to give acknowledgement to the area, to the indigenous people of this area. Wichita has long been a summer camping ground for many tribes, among them the Kaw, Osage, Sioux, and the Wichita. And today, many indigenous individuals, as well as tribal communities and nations, make their home here in Wichita. So I'm going to start, I guess, share my screen here. And start off under present mode. Okay, I think we got it. All right. Yes, it feels a little unusual to be sort of talking to a screen and not seeing all of your lovely faces out there. So I look forward to a conversation in a bit. So I wanted to talk about two aspects of my practice. One being the more critically socially engaged community type of practice that informs my pedagogy and how I teach in the classroom, and then also my independent artistic practice, which sometimes includes some of those aspects, but also incorporates other things of more of a personal nature. So just a little sampling of some things here that I've done over the past. In the middle here, these are my two daughters. This is a photograph that I took of them a few years ago. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about this project on the left and my piece from last year. Let's see if I can. Okay, I'm using Google Slides, so this is a little new for me. I think I'm supposed to use the cursor down there to advance. So here at WSU Art Education, one of the things that a part of the process of, I guess, nurturing and helping to kind of build the foundational careers for future art educators, three sort of emphasis that I put in the program is the idea of creativity, culture, and community, and that intersection of those three. This all also kind of ties to my own personal process, I guess, in terms of the things that I do to nurture those things in myself. And so I also like to, you know, dabble in a little bit of creativity. Some of the things that I do on a regular basis is find opportunities to collaborate with other people. On the left is my goddaughter doing some artwork. I have them regularly over at my house at least once a month to do some art with kids. I also started a Friday kids friendship group, we're calling it, but we're using art as a process to help us connect with each other. And I have children that are participating in this from the Wichita area, Oklahoma, Washington, Mexico City, and Lima, Peru. It also provides an opportunity to practice a little bit of Spanish, and for the students in some of the Spanish-speaking countries to practice their English. Another area of sort of nurturing creativity is just kind of a little bit of an exploratory doodling of sorts activity that I also incorporate in my classes. And we do this thing I call a Foursquare, which I adapted from an artist friend of mine, Nancy Steele McCoskey, who I met and worked with in Utah. And we work with small little squares, but we collaborate on these. So we kind of pass them around and give each other starters and keep working on them, and kind of keeps you in the game with a little bit of manipulation of materials and processes. I also believe in really focused inquiry. And by that, I mean, thinking deeply about things, journaling. There's a small little stack on the left of tons of journals that I have, writing, sketching, doodling, doing focused research. I read a lot, and I'm still a little bit old school. I like reading books, and I'm usually reading 3 or 4 at a time. But I also am exploring on the internet. I recently watched this particular YouTube art talk that's represented on the right there, the Decolonializing the Museum and Art collection. And Terry Greaves was a guest artist. She's there on the left in the photo in the picture. She's a Native American artist. And so that was a really intriguing presentation. Another aspect that I do, or a process I think that I incorporate in my practice, is the idea of mindful exploration. And what I mean by that is I do a lot of walking and sort of looking. And I think being an artist, I can't help but, see things with my sort of artist eye, somewhat in a formalistic sense, I think. And so as I'm walking around, I do like to focus in on something and take pictures of interesting things when I see it. And then I also incorporate once a week. Sometimes I don't quite make that once a week, but I really try to do that once a week art date, it's called. And so I find an unusual artwork that I haven't seen yet, or even I might even go Like I've gone to the WAM several times, and I will sit in there and just kind of commune with the art and kind of absorb the energy, think about it, observe it. This piece on the right is actually a really interesting relief brick sculpture that's over in Concordia, Kansas. And I was over there this last Saturday. So that was a new one for me. Many of the things that I do stems back from many years of research and work with a dear friend of mine, Michael Cabote. And this particular mural that he created, which is called The Journey of the Human Spirit, informs a lot of my pedagogical practice. Here are sort of like the details of the 5 panels. Throat feels a little dry. And the journey of the human spirit, basically, Cabote has uses his art as a healing process and explores and ties together myths and histories and personal experiences to create a visual story of past, present, and future. And you can see this really represented in these 5 panels here. And in the panels, he talks about the journey or the emergence up here. I'm assuming you can see my cursor kind of swirling around here. This is the emergence, and the Hopi people, and all people, while this somewhat leans towards telling the Hopi story, it also is the story of the human experience. And emergence coming, but the shadow side coming out with us. And then he tells the story of all the sort of the challenges that we work towards, or not work towards, excuse me, challenges that we endure, but the idea of working towards this place of harmony or balance. And ultimately, this is actually the last one right here, Mike had this idea of us all coming together. You could see some different symbiology in here from different cultures, and kind of bringing healing as we work together for a better future. And so from this experience of working with Mike, I lived in Flagstaff, Arizona for about 10 years. And spent a lot of time on the Hopi Reservation. I developed what was called the ACTE curriculum approach, ACTE. And so my students and I talk about things and development of focused art research and art making that goes through a process of awareness, critique, and transformative empowerment. One example of pulling in a particular lesson might be shown here in this example of Erica Lord, who is a Native American artist. And so bringing in contemporary artists into the classroom. And this is an example of a kind of a overview of a sample unit plan. And my students and I work on these collaboratively. So I'll go back to the PowerPoint. Go to the next slide. One of the major projects that I'm doing right now is called Art for Peace, and it's that's the short name. It's more detailed. It's the Puzzle Piece Pledge Project. And this project also comes out of some of that idea of bringing awareness and critique and transformative empowerment to communities, but also has a genesis in a project that I did in Ecuador, where I was invited along with 18 other artists to come into a community. And we sort of did a kind of an art slam all through the little town, and it was a protest in regards to the mining that was going on and the displacement of many of the indigenous communities in that area. And so from that, I developed this idea of thinking about how can I get others involved in becoming more mindful and aware of what it is that we do on an individual basis can contribute to peace and healing in the world in regards to our relationships as well as the environment. And that's what the Four Pieces project is about. And a couple of years ago, I took 4 students from WSU over to Lima, Peru, and we worked with students there to create their puzzle piece pledge, where they focus in on just one thing. Because when you think about peace, you know, it's a pretty large concept to try to accomplish throughout the world. But the idea here is to think about one thing that you could pledge to do to help make your life, your community a better place. And so that's what's represented in each one of these puzzle pieces. They also trade puzzle pieces with other students. And then at their location, they can create a mural if they so choose. That's a combination of puzzle pieces from their site, as well as puzzle pieces from students from somewhere else. A few other projects, I'm just going to real quick kind of show you some different things that align with this idea of community and social practice in having students think about relationships and their community. We did a project over at the Mayberry Cultural Fine Arts Magnet School. It's a middle school, and this is the Peace Heritage Tree that the students created. And this work is all created by 6th, 7th, and 8th grade students. It's not a real clear picture, apologize for that. Here's some other things that we did over there with those students. Another project sort of focusing in on this idea of peace, as well as getting to kind of know yourself and collaborating with your community, is I've done a project I refer to as a me shirt or a we shirt. And so here students are creating their we shirts and doing collaborative work on creating designs on t-shirts. Bringing in contemporary artists, I think, is very important in today's art education curriculum. And so part of my pedagogical process is to invite artists into the classroom. This is Will Wilson, Roxanne Swinsel, and Mark Tabo, who are all Indigenous artists from different tribal communities. And I've done projects where I brought them into the class to share with students their perspectives about art and community and identity, and then we do some project making with them as well. Recently, the WSU students created a mural with the community based on the Wichita Public Library's Big Read, and we used iconic images around Wichita. You can see some of the things that the students chose to represent ideas about Wichita. When I moved back here to Wichita, actually, I grew up in Hazel, Kansas, and then I moved around quite a bit. And 25 years later, I'm back here in Wichita. I noticed many of the things in Wichita had changed. I was really seeing a lot of art, and it was really exciting to see some of these different things. And one of the things I've become really interested in is working with the Mid-American All Indian Museum, and delving into some inquiry about the Keeper of the Plains. And so this is a new project that I'm working on research-wise, and thinking about some of the imagery of the Keeper of the Plains that you see really all throughout Wichita, but exactly what does that mean to Wichitans and to the Indigenous community? And so we're also looking at bringing some conversation back to Black Bear Boson, who is the artist who created the Keeper of the Plains. This summer is going to be the centennial of his birth, and there's going to be some big celebrations and projects happening. So watch for that. And WSU Art Education is going to collaborate on some of those things. Doing quite a lot of projects over the summer. I was fortunate to be invited into this group, the Antiracist Art Teachers, and this is our website. And on this website, you'll find lots of resources that have been collaboratively pulled together that not only includes representation of lots of different BIPOC artists, diverse artists. I'm pretty much in charge of doing the Indigenous section. And this is the team that I'm working with. And this collaborative process that happens, you know, I think is something that helps me to certainly grow as an educator and learn from all of these educators throughout the country, and pull these new ideas into my curriculum at WSU. So we go also beyond just representation, but we think about some of the issues surrounded with you know, social duress that is going on in our country right now. Let's see. Get back to my PowerPoint. Okay, so this brings me to the current faculty show. And these three pieces are really more about my personal practice, I think, or one aspect of it. And these three pieces are actually in honor of my father. I have a picture of him here on my desk. Look at him every day. This is him at one of my exhibitions when I was an undergrad years ago. He was always very supportive of my artistic endeavors. He was quite creative himself. I think my dad could have been an artist if that was something that was more nurtured for him as he was growing up. But he was always making things, worked for Boeing for years. But these pieces all represent aspects of my father to honor him. And from the right side here, this protea plant is what's represented here. And I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. In the middle, we have a bird of peace and then an eagle over here. My dad loved birds, so that was one reason why the birds. Proteas on the left side, there's examples of a couple of different types of proteas. And I love flowers. My dad was a gardener as well, loved plants and flowers. I think we got that from certainly from my grandmother, who grew a lot of a variety of different plants at her home as well. She had a greenhouse. Proteas are actually originally from South Africa, but they're pretty prevalent in Hawaii now. My parents are from Hawaii. My dad was born and raised on Maui, and he grew up in what's called upcountry, and which is sort of in the kind of mountainous area. And so this is a protea. Protea are also often used at funerals because they're really unusual, beautiful flowers, and they last quite a long time when you place them out at cemetery sites. Some details. I love texture. I think I've always been involved in things in the environment. I've grown up around Native American communities, as well as interactions with my father and extended family in Hawaii, as well as in Kansas, and going camping, working with dirt, growing vegetables, collecting rocks and shells. So texture is something that's really of great interest to me. My dad raised birds. He had pigeons and ducks and geese, and he also was quite fond of feathers. And this piece right here kind of shows it's a large blown up print that I did, relief print, and shows a bird of peace, like a dove or maybe even a pigeon, bringing a message. So I kind of think about it as a good sign, something to look towards. My dad raised, I don't know why I keep saying grow, raised pigeons, and actually had wanted to try to do some things where he trained them to send messages between him and another friend. And that was when I was a child. I don't quite know what exactly happened with that, but it's a very interesting endeavor, I think, to pursue. This is the final piece, and it's the largest piece in the exhibition, and it kind of shows a little bit about an emerging type of process that I'm exploring with. In college, I suppose I was trained more as a traditional painter, in the sense that working from painting objects, things from experiences in my life, but oil painting, just with pigment, but yet doing things with incorporating lots of different textural application of paint is very interesting to me. Sort of going between thick and thin areas, glazing, impasto type of techniques, mixing colors, doing things directly on the canvas. And now I've been trying to dabble in a little bit of bringing in different found objects and materials. I did a series of paintings where I incorporated feathers and fabric onto the paintings. And this piece right here, which is titled Somewhere Over the Rainbow, is kind of the major piece in honor of my dad. And I kind of think of the eagle there symbolically as him, and this idea of freedom, and him sort of flying off somewhere over the rainbow to, that wonderful, peaceful place for him. And he is then taking with him his sort of bucket, which is kind of in the purple down here. And I'm going a little bit closer. Here's with the bucket, and this is an extension of the rainbow, these pieces that are coming down with the beads. These are the things in his bucket, and these are all symbolic of my dad's life and the connections between Kansas and Hawaii. And this is sand actually from Maui. We've got the rainbow colors here across with these flowers to indicate all the times that I've visited Hawaii and gone back, shells that I've collected from there. Mardi Gras, my dad was really quite fond of Mardi Gras, camping, hula girls, gardening, of course, hunting, fishing. We've got feathers here. So, and these are just here for celebration. My dad liked to have fun. So I want to go back to this again, just to kind of highlight here the symbolic shapes that I included in this piece of the island of Maui right here. And this is a turtle, which is a Hawaiian sea turtle. And on the back of the sea turtle is the hook, fishing hook of Maui, who is a demigod of Polynesia. And my dad was a fisherman, so I put the hook on there. And then right here is a outline of, or sort of outline of Kansas. There's other drawings in here. It's kind of hard to see in this picture, but of sunflower contrasted with orchids. So we've got Kansas to Hawaii over here on the left. A little close up of that. So I think that probably about uses up my time, and I would welcome a discussion or questions.
Thank you, Lori. Would you do me a favor and add the URL for your newer project, Antiracist Teaching, to the chat box so everyone
Yes, I will.
can have it while I'm while I'm giving everybody permission to turn on their cameras and mics, and I hope all of you will join us.
I feel like I kind of talked kind of fast. So hopefully that all made sense. Let's see.
This always takes me a moment, so.
Stop presenting. So, Antiracist Art Teachers.
All right, I think I have everyone. I hope you'll all join us. Please do. You should get a notification that you can turn on your cameras and mics. There's Ted. Hi, Ted.
Hi.
Hi. Welcome.
Are we officially in the Q&A section?
We are officially there.
Hey, Lori, thanks for a really great presentation. I did not think that you spoke too fast. I ended up to duck out there for a little bit, so I may have missed a little bit of your talk, but I guess I'm curious, you know, the artwork in the Faculty Biennial seems really rooted in a personal narrative, and but at the same time, you know, it interweaves with cultural narratives. And so I'm thinking about that, and then your work with, you know, anti-racist teaching. And I'm just, you know, wondering how you view the personal and the broader cultural things. Do you feel like those are, in terms of the purpose of your work, yeah, you're talking about personal things that involve cultural messages, but it doesn't seem like your purpose is to put out a cultural message that uses personal things. Do you see the personal and the cultural like parallel or like intimately interwoven? Like, how do you think about that in terms of like your intentions as an artist really being the focus there?
Wow, that's a great question. A lot of stuff to think about in that.
Yeah, I was thinking about it for a while.
Yeah, I do think that they're interwoven. I mean, you can't separate yourself from everything else in the world. I mean, you're a part of it. And I think that that's part of what I'm trying to get at in terms of my pedagogical practice is we actually start out thinking about what is your place and how are you situated? You know, what's your positionality in this world, and how does that intersect across different contexts, different roles in your life? And so that piece probably is very much about the position my father had in the world. And so, yeah, the cultural is intertwined in there, but it's also about me too, because I am my father, you know, in a sense that we absorb part of, you know, those experiences from the people, places, and things that we live with into our identity in some form or another. It doesn't, and it's not, when I say sort of absorb that, it's not like I'm, you know, sort of mimicking my father or whatever, but, you know, there's elements of that experience that kind of works through me, but I, with my other experiences, transform that into something different. And hopefully, you know, I was also a Girl Scout, so it's and my dad kind of believed in this sort of theory too, as well as kind of like leaving a place better than you found it. And so I think that that's a lot of what I believe art education should be about, helping to leave this world a better place in some way, as well as my personal work. So yeah, there's cultural elements in terms of iconography or the symbiology that connects to the stories about Hawaii, about Kansas, and my upbringing. So
Yeah, it just seems like your work, there's a real accessibility there. And I think for a lot of our students who are dealing with sort of personal subjects, like navigating between like what is personal in the work and what is personal in terms of like it's about the person, right? So I think your work is very much personal, um, without sort of being about the person or about the, I mean, you draw that inspiration, you bring that into the work, but it opens up into so much more. And I think that's where it's really successful in its accessibility.
right. Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
I'm sitting in my office right now, and I have a couple of pieces. I don't know if you can't see that very clearly back there, but these are also some commemorative pieces. I think I tend to make a lot of work that, yeah, speaks to particular places, particular people that are important to me, but yet there's some element about that experience that then, like you said, could also be, you know, informative or inspiring for others. You know, they can find some sort of connection point.
Ryan Lawrence, Lori, is wondering, he's wanting to learn more about some of the resources and programs you mentioned, such as ACTE.
Okay.
And he's wondering how he can learn more about these in your programs.
Oh, great question. So the ACTE is basically a curriculum format, I guess, that I utilize in my art education classes, as well as I tend to have a tendency to talk about things that sort of constantly kind of come back to this idea of being aware, you know, critiquing that awareness, you know, asking questions, and then finding some sort of transformative or empowering way to then represent something, you know, for the better. So we work with that in terms of the kinds of units that students create, lesson plans at one point or another through thematic ideas that reference sometimes social justice concepts, conflict, power, identity, community. Could be something a little bit more friendly, like friendship, you know, but even that can be challenging. The Antiracist Art Teachers website has a section where I have some of the ACTE resources on there, as well as throughout that website, there's things that interconnect with that. So that would probably be a place to go. And I'm working on actually a book where I'm going to kind of go through those things. So that's something that's in development right now.
And have you, I'm curious, have you been sharing the anti-racist teaching resources with our school districts in our both local
Yeah.
community and region?
Yeah, actually, so next week, the 259 teachers from Wichita Public Schools are going to come over here and spend some time at the Ulrich and at ACTE for their annual big professional development day, or actually it's 2 days. And I'm going to be doing a presentation with them, sort of walking them through the website and talking about some of these things specifically. So Ryan, if you're really interested, why don't you shoot me an email, and I can see, I don't know what time I'm on the schedule, but we're going to be in one of those big rooms. I would think there's more than enough room for you to pop in if you were interested. We've also, as a team, the Antiracist Art Teachers, we've been doing PDs with several school districts throughout the country. I have one actually this Friday with Miami Public School District. I've done one with the San Jose Public School District, Vermont, Art Education Association, and the Maryland Art Education Association. And there's others to come. So we've really been talking with a lot of teachers.
That's fantastic. That's a great project. And I'm sure, especially, you know, after the last year in which virtual learning, you know, we've all become much more comfortable with this format. The reach is, you know, much more expansive.
Yeah, that's true. It's kind of exciting. And,
Yeah.
you know, one of the things with the Antiracist Art Teachers, our group and sort of our philosophy of what we're trying to do is important to mention again that it's more than just about representation of, you know, BIPOC artists, like Black and Brown Indigenous artists. It it's about getting into some of the issues that are plaguing our country right now, and how that might inform the way we understand ourselves and others, and the way we can communicate with each other, and working towards you know, again, that better place. So that's a lot of the process of it.
Excellent. Lori, Emily has a question. I always enjoy learning about your approach to teaching. What do you think a well-prepared art education graduate looks like? And part two, what are the most important lessons you want to impart in your program at Wichita State?
Oh, that's a great question. Wow. Let's see. Well, there is so much to be a well-prepared art education graduate. You know, you need to have a passion for your subject, you know, and also a passion for working with kids. And so those are, you know, two things that students are cultivating along the way through experiences that we provide in the program, where they're able to connect directly with the community and do projects with students of all ages, even before they get into the classroom for student teaching. But I think an important thing for a graduate to walk away with is really a stronger understanding of where they see themselves positioned within art education and their role, because you can't do everything. And so I do have students go through a process of kind of mind mapping of their own selves, and looking at different ways to incorporate philosophies and strategies for teaching. And they need to take all of that and figure out how that makes sense for them. And so if they can walk away with maybe a stronger understanding of what their vision is, I think that's an important aspect of the program.
The second part, and maybe you answered, so forgive me if you have, but what are the most important lessons you want to impart in your program at Wichita State?
I think that it's, you know, who you are matters, and what you do matters, and that where you are situated in this world, you have a choice, you know, to impart something to, you know, your students, your community, that can make a difference in a positive way. You know, we all have, we're always, in every, I think, moment in what we do, are kind of at these crossroads of you know, trying to make the right choice. And so I think being mindful of that is really an important lesson for us to keep working on, so that we can, you know, again, find some peace for ourselves and others.
Well, and you know, your program is growing.
Yeah, it is. And I think some people come to an art education program and they think about, I'm coming here, I'm going to learn how to teach students to draw this still life, or, to learn how to do 1-point perspective, or, but art education is really changing. It's not really so much about that. It's really more about how art is a part of the human experience. And I think an important aspect of our program here is I try to encourage and provide opportunities for students to tap into that for themselves, so that they can also then share that with their students. And we're not, of course, throwing away the creative production side and the skill building side. But I don't see art education as a means to teach students how to just create one little project and then they move on to something else. It's more about the bigger world and your place in it.
Miranda says, I heard you are also working on a land acknowledgement statement for the university. And could you explain to us what exactly that means?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks, Miranda. That's a great question. So Miranda's actually helping out a little bit with that. Miranda works in the art education area with me, and she's been certainly a godsend in a lot of ways, and helping me with many of the projects. But we are partnering with some faculty in the anthropology area, and also talking with the Mid-American All Indian Museum. And I imagine that we'll bring in some community members, Native American Indigenous individuals in Wichita, to look into creating a statement that acknowledges the Indigenous people that were here before colonialization. And I really truly believe it's important that we recognize those that came before, as well as those that are still here. So the land acknowledgement statement is really about representation, acknowledging representation of past, present, and future. It's not just about saying that, these people were here and now we're here, but to also recognize that Native and Indigenous individuals and communities are living and present, and doing things in their communities in the world.
Good. That's excellent. Jim Farley has a question. How do you respond to the argument that art cannot change the world, or even one person's view?
Wow. I thought about this idea when I was kind of formulating this approach to the 4-piece, and having students create art, envision what do you envision the world to be in the future, and what are your hopes and dreams for change and things like that. And I started thinking about it like, wow, that's a tall order. That's difficult. One person cannot necessarily change the world or be changed is the argument here. So then I took a step back and I thought, well, that's where you have to think about, yeah, that one, it does have to start with that one. So the 4-piece project, we talk about the bigger idea of peace and change in the world, but it's very narrow and focused on one thing. What's one thing that you could pledge? And the idea is that by pledging that, there's this sort of domino effect, I guess, that it could be something as simple as a smile. You know, if you've ever noticed, if you smile at someone, most often people smile back. And there's actually a biological thing that happens in your body when you smile, and endorphins that get sent to your brain. And so bringing that kind of a smile and happiness, and I know that sounds like, oh, that's so too good feely, whatever, you know, but the more that it's done and the more people that do that, you know, it's going to increase the chance of change, right? I got in a little bit of a debate recently with one of my siblings about, you know, about voting, and she was going on about how, you know, your vote doesn't count, you know, kind of thing, and I said, well, yes, it does. And she said, no, it doesn't. We have the electorate, you know, and it doesn't matter. And even, you know, Kansas is a red state. And so, you know, it doesn't matter. So whatever you're going to vote, it's going to be what it's going to be. And well, you know, if we all stayed stuck in that same thinking, then of course nothing's going to change. And so regardless of what side you're on, you know, in terms of voting, particularly, if you don't do it, nothing's going to change. And it's the action. And so for me, I think that art, when you're creating something, you're putting forth an action, and then when the viewer, whether it's you or someone else, is connecting with that piece, that it actually does something in you. You know, it makes you respond, even if it's a response of like, ugh, you know, sometimes that can create a change. Hopefully it'll be for good, but I don't know. That's kind of a long-winded way of trying to answer that.
Well, and as Jim can attest to, he's one of our docents, our volunteer docents at the museum, and we often have open discussions, you know, close looking and discussions on, you know, with K through 12 students that are complex issues, difficult issues, challenging issues, and you know, those students gain a new perspective through this open discussion with their peers. And I think, you know, have real growing moments in which they see things maybe from a different perspective, from a different, and begin to think more deeply about what they're looking at and the meaning behind.
Yeah.
So
I think any interaction with art, whether you're the maker or the viewer, that it gets into internal talk, as well as, you know, if you've got a group here with you, you know, that external conversation, that's where the change happens.
yeah. Hi, Ted.
I can't find my little reaction buttons, but I really appreciated your response to that. I like that, you know, you immediately went to the personal and talked about ways of personal expression reaching other people on a really personal level. I thought that was a really nice way to take that. But then also the global, you know, ways that we affect things on a global platform as artists. And I think, you know, the way I take your answer is really reframing the question into not, you know, can art change the world, which is a really, how, you know, is there an answer for that? Let's assume that it does. And what are the things that we want to change in the world? And in what ways can art affect that change? And what do we, on a personal level, want to do with our art towards that goal? And that is really doable. That makes it feel like that's a real thing. And when we put it in that bigger cloud context of, can art even change one person's mind? Is it really about that? Is that, you know, I mean, so I think I understand that, like, for docents, that's a really real question that they encounter. So I would just say, you know, you made a really great example of reframing it to, you know, let's assume that it can. What do we want to change about the world? and in what ways does
Right.
art change the world?
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I want to thank everyone for joining us this morning, and thank you, Lori. This was a great talk, and I loved, you know, learning about your recent projects that you've been working on. I think they're important, and yeah.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank
you so
you.
much. And thank you, Ted, for joining us.
Yeah. Thanks to everyone. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and we'll do our best to reschedule Tina in the weeks ahead, and be sure and join us next week for Dr. Brittany Lockhart.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Lori. Take
Yeah.
care.
Thanks.
Hi, Miranda.
Thanks. Bye.